So what's going on here? Is time actually speeding up? Well, of course not. The Earth is still taking the same amount of time to go around the sun. A day is still 24 hours. But something's definitely happening in here, in the brain. And it's not what you might think. Now, most people, when they try to explain this, they say something like, well, when you're 5 years old, 1 year is 20% of your entire life, but when you're 50, it's only 2%. And that sounds pretty good, right? It's mathematical, it's logical. But here's the thing, it's wrong, or at least it's incomplete, because if that were the whole story, time should speed up in a very specific way. And when scientists actually test this, when they ask people of different ages how fast time seems to be going, the numbers don't match up. Let me tell you what's really happening. It's much more interesting. Your brain doesn't have a clock inside it, not like a watch. There's no little mechanism going tick-tock, tick-tock. What you have instead is something far more peculiar. You have billions of neurons firing in patterns, and these patterns, these rhythms of activity, they create what we experience as time. Now here's where it gets interesting. There's a chemical in your brain called dopamine. You've probably heard of it. People talk about it like it's the pleasure chemical or the reward chemical, but that's not quite right. Dopamine does a lot more than that. And one of the things it does, which is absolutely fascinating, is it controls the speed of your internal clock. When dopamine levels are high, your internal clock runs slower. And when I say slower, I mean that time seems to pass more quickly. Let me explain that because it sounds backwards. Imagine you have a stopwatch inside your brain and it's counting off subjective seconds. If that stopwatch is running slow, if it's taking longer to count off each second, then when 60 actual seconds have passed, your internal stopwatch might have only counted 40 seconds. So you underestimate how much time has gone by. An hour feels like 40 minutes. A year feels like 8 months. Here's the disturbing part. As you age, your dopamine levels decline. That's just what happens. The dopamine-producing cells in your brain, they don't work as efficiently. The whole system gets a bit noisy, a bit unreliable. And what does that do to your sense of time? It makes your internal clock run slower and slower, which means that the same amount of actual time feels shorter and shorter. But wait, there's more to it than just dopamine. Let me tell you about something called neural adaptation. This is beautiful. When you experience something new, your brain lights up like a Christmas tree. Neurons are firing all over the place, making connections, encoding this new experience into memory. Think about the first time you drove a car, or the first time you visited a new city, or your first day at a new job. Your brain was working overtime, processing all this novel information. And because your brain was working so hard, because so much was happening, time seemed to stretch out. Those experiences felt long while they were happening. But here's what happens as you get older. You've seen most things before. You know what a tree looks like. You know what your commute is like. You know what your office looks like. Your brain has already mapped all of this, so when you experience these things again, your neurons don't fire as much. The brain says, oh, I know this. Tree, already cataloged, moving on. This is called neural adaptation. The brain becomes more efficient, but there's a cost. When your brain doesn't encode as many new memories because everything is familiar, when you look back on a period of time, there are fewer memories to count. Think about it like this. Memory is how we measure time retrospectively. When you remember your childhood, you can remember so many distinct events. First day of school, birthday parties, learning to ride a bike, making friends, all these distinct, vivid memories. But when you think about last month, what do you remember? Maybe a few things that stood out, but mostly it's a blur of routine. So here's what's happening. While you're living through time, your slowing dopamine clock makes each moment feel like it's passing quickly. And when you look back, you have fewer memories because you're experiencing fewer novel things, so the whole period seems even shorter in retrospect. You're getting hit from both sides. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't inevitable. It's not like there's some law of physics that says time must speed up as you age. This is biology, and biology can be changed. Think about what happens when you go on vacation to somewhere completely new. Time slows down again, doesn't it? You spend a week in a new place doing new things, and when you get back, that week feels like it was much longer than a typical week at home. Why? Because your brain was encoding new memories. The neural adaptation stopped. You were paying attention to everything because it was all novel. Here's another thing. Scientists have found that people with Parkinson's disease, which is characterized by severe dopamine deficiency, they have serious problems with time perception. They underestimate intervals. Ask them to estimate how long a minute is, and they'll consistently think it's up before it really is. Their internal clocks are running even slower than normal aging would predict. And here's the fascinating part. When you give them dopamine-enhancing medications, their time perception improves. The clock speeds up again. This tells us something important. It tells us that the biological mechanisms underlying time perception can be modified. They're not fixed. Now let me tell you about the brain regions involved, because this is important for understanding the whole picture. There's a circuit in your brain called the corticostriatal circuit. Big words, but here's what it means. You've got your cortex, the outer layer of your brain, where a lot of high-level processing happens, and you've got your striatum, which is deeper in the brain and is involved in movement, habits, and yes, timing. These two regions talk to each other constantly, and they use dopamine as part of their communication system. In this circuit, neurons in your cortex fire in rhythmic patterns, like an orchestra playing a symphony. And neurons in your striatum, they listen to this symphony, and they can detect specific patterns. When the right pattern occurs, the striatum knows, okay, this much time has passed. That's your internal clock. But when dopamine levels drop, when the whole system gets noisier with age, these patterns become less reliable. The striatal neurons can't detect them as accurately. Your clock drifts. There's something else fascinating that happens with age. Your hippocampus, which is crucial for forming new memories, it starts to change too, not in a dramatic way like in Alzheimer's disease, but subtly. The hippocampus in older adults becomes less good at distinguishing between similar experiences. Young hippocampal neurons, when you show them two slightly different environments, they create completely different firing patterns. This is environment A. This is environment B. They're different. But old hippocampal neurons, they tend to use the same firing patterns for similar environments. Everything starts to blur together. So imagine you're going through your daily routine. Your aging hippocampus isn't making sharp distinctions between today and yesterday and last week. They all activate similar neural patterns, which means they all get mushed together in memory, which means when you look back, you can't really distinguish them. They become one undifferentiated blob of regular life, and that blob subjectively feels shorter than it should. Now here's something that really gets me. There's this idea in neuroscience called Bayesian optimization. Fancy term, but here's what it means. Your brain is constantly making predictions about the world based on past experience, and it uses statistics to do this. As you get older, your brain has more past experience to draw on, but it also has noisier data coming in from your senses and your timing circuits. So what does your brain do? It relies more heavily on your prior expectations and less on the actual sensory data. Think about it like this. You ask a young person to estimate how long 30 seconds is. They'll base their estimate mainly on counting off the interval, on what they're experiencing right now. Ask an older person to do the same thing. They'll still count, but their brain is also going 30 seconds, usually feels about like this, based on a lifetime of experience. And if their counting mechanism is noisy because of dopamine decline, they'll weight their prior expectations more heavily. This actually helps them perform reasonably well on timing tasks despite the biological decline. But it also means they're not really experiencing time as directly, they're predicting it based on memory. This raises a deep question. Are we really experiencing time, or are we just remembering what it used to feel like and assuming it's the same? Let me tell you about one more thing that complicates this picture. Emotions. Time perception isn't just about dopamine and neural circuits. It's also about what you're paying attention to and how you feel. When you're happy, genuinely engaged in something, dopamine is released, and paradoxically, time flies. That old saying is actually true. When you're bored or anxious, time crawls. And here's something interesting. Older adults show something called a positivity bias. They tend to focus more on positive stimuli and less on negative stimuli. When older adults see happy faces, they actually overestimate how long they were shown. Their brains are dwelling on the positive, which extends their subjective experience of it. But in daily life, if you're not experiencing many intense emotions, if life has become routine, then you're not getting those emotional markers that help define memories and stretch out time. So let's put this all together. What's really happening as you age? First, your dopamine system is declining, which makes your internal clock run slower, which makes time seem to pass more quickly moment to moment. Second, you're experiencing fewer novel things, so your brain is encoding fewer distinct memories, which makes time periods feel shorter when you look back on them. Third, your hippocampus is getting less precise at distinguishing between similar experiences, which makes memories blur together. Fourth, your brain is compensating for noisy timing signals by relying more on prior expectations, which means you're experiencing a kind of predicted time rather than immediate time. And fifth, if you're not experiencing strong emotions or paying close attention to what you're doing, you're not creating the kind of rich, detailed memories that make time feel substantial. All of these things together create this overwhelming sense that time is speeding up. But here's what I want you to understand. This is not inevitable. It's not some cosmic law. It's biology, and biology can be influenced. You want to slow down time? Do new things. Seriously, learn a new skill. Visit new places. Break your routines. Pay attention to the world around you like you're seeing it for the first time. Because when you do this, you're fighting against neural adaptation. You're forcing your brain to encode new memories. You're creating the kind of rich, detailed experience that makes time feel expansive. Exercise helps too. Physical exercise increases dopamine production. It keeps those dopaminergic neurons healthier for longer. It's not a complete solution, but it helps. Mindfulness, paying close attention to your immediate experience, that helps, because it forces you to process more information, to notice details you'd normally skip over. More information processing means more memory encoding means time feels longer. The paradox is that the same efficiency that makes your brain so good at navigating a familiar world is what makes time slip away. Your brain is trying to be helpful. It's saying, I know how to handle this situation, no need to pay close attention. But in doing so, it's robbing you of the experience of duration. Here's the thing that's both disturbing and liberating. You have more control over your subjective experience of time than you think. The brain is plastic. Neural circuits can be modified. Dopamine systems can be supported. Attention can be trained. You're not doomed to watch time accelerate uncontrollably until everything becomes a blur. Time is the most valuable thing you have. It's the one thing you can never get back. And the fact that your subjective experience of it can compress as you age, that time can seem to vanish, that's genuinely disturbing when you think about it. You could live to be 90, but if the last 40 years subjectively feel like they're flying by, are you really getting those 40 years? But understanding the mechanism gives you power. When you understand that it's about dopamine, about novelty, about attention, about memory encoding, then you can do something about it. You can structure your life to fight against it. You can choose to stay curious, to keep learning, to keep experiencing new things. You can choose to pay attention. Because in the end, time is what you make of it, not philosophically, neurologically. Your brain literally constructs your experience of duration based on what you do, what you pay attention to, what you remember. The clock on the wall ticks at the same rate whether you're 5 or 50, but the clock in your head is variable. And that's both the problem and the solution. So now you know. Now you understand what's happening when years seem to fly by. It's not magic. It's not mysterious. It's dopamine and neural adaptation and memory encoding and attention. It's biology. And like all biology, it can be understood and it can be influenced. The question is, what are you going to do about it?